Hi everyone. My name is Issa Yusuf. In this presentation, I would walk through how I use Flaw Hypothesis methodology and common assessment tools to identify and analyze vulnerabilities in a lab environment using Metasploitable and then Chioptrix 2 and Kali Linux and similar targets. I'll show how I formed hypotheses about potential flaws, validated them with tools like Nmap and vulnerability scanners, traced one vulnerability back to its root cause, and then connected all of that to legal, ethical, and industrial standards around vulnerability disclosure. Think of this as an end-to-end view from this part. From this part looks weird to here is the root cause and here is how and when we should talk about it to the outside world. Flaw hypothesis methodology. Flaw hypothesis is basically a structured way to guess where a system is broken, then prove it or rule it out. Step one is recon and profiling. I started with Nmap scan to identify open ports, running services and versions that gave me a baseline of what the target is actually exposing. Two is to hypothesize likely flaw classes based on that profile. For example, seeing an outdated FTP server suggests weak authentication or known backdoors. An old web server suggests validation issue or outdated CMS components. Step three is to design tests that can confirm or refute each hypothesis. That might be targeted Nmap script, a NICTO or OpenVAS scan, or a specific manual test in the browser. The fourth one is basically to refine the hypothesis based on result. Some ideas get discarded, others moved up in the priority list. And finally, is to link confirmed flaws to their possible root causes in configuration, code, or processes. For the vulnerability analysis, I combined multiple tools so I was not relying on a single perspective. Nmap gave me the open ports, the service fingerprint, and sometimes a version. From there, I could map each service to known CVEs or common misconfigurations. Vulnerabilities kind of like OpenVAS or GVM help validate those findings and added details such as CVSS scores and remediation guidelines. Web tools like NICTO or WebZap can flag directly listing outdated servers, banners, and then impute validation issues. The mapping step is important. I'm not just collecting a list of issues. I am mapping vulnerabilities to assets. And for example, a VS TFPD 2.34 on port 21 mapped to a backdoor that can provide a remote shell, which directly affects system integrity and can ultimately impact availability and if the system is taken over. To identify vulnerabilities, I started broad and then narrowed. I did an Nmap, which was the first. I ran an Nmap on a port scan with services and version detection to get a fingerprint of the system. Once I noticed the FTP on port 21, with VS FTPD 2.3.4, that immediately triggered a hypothesis that the host might be vulnerable to well-known VS FTPD backdoor, CVE 200.25.23. From there, I use Nmap NSE script to get the backdoor out of it. In parallel, I run a vulnerability scan to see what is reported about that host. And I did a manual check, like connecting with a simple FTP client onto server. Um, One vulnerability I focused on is the VSFP FTPD 2.3.4. This version is notorious because a backdoor copy of the source code was updated to the official distribution site for a short period of time in 2011. The backdoor works by allowing an attacker to connect to the FTP service and authenticate with a username that ends in a smiley. When that condition is met, the backdoor code opens a shell to port to 62,000, giving an attacker command shell on the system itself. Basically, tracing root cause. Flaw hypothesis does not just stop at this box. In vulnerability, we also want to understand how the vulnerability came into being. In the case of the current vulnerability, the root cause is basically a supply chain compromise. Attack managed to backdoor the official VSFT PD 2.3.4 backdoor or tarbell. So anyone who downloaded it during a certain time window got a malicious version that included the backdoor. On the victim side, the administrator installed that version and never upgraded to replace it. Based on this vulnerability, the attack vector is pretty direct. An external attacker scans, network range for FTP and the fingerprint, and then connect to the FTP service for the backdoor itself. My recommendation is to follow a coordinated vulnerability discussion model. In most cases, that means reporting the vulnerability to the vendor or owner as soon as possible. To summarize, Flaw Hypothesis methodology gave me a structured way to go from open ports and banners to specific testable ideas about vulnerabilities. Vulnerability analysis and mapping helped connect those findings to asset and business impact rather than just stopping at a long scanner report. Thank you very much for listening to my Flaw Hypothesis presentation. My name is Issa Yusuf.